Researchers are discovering all sorts of interesting ways to apply generative AI and agentic technologies and how they execute studies. But there's been less discussion about how these new technologies could apply to collected research and knowledge management and activating insights after studies are complete. My name's Jacob Burghardt. I recently wrote an article on this subject, and in this video, I'm going to walk you through it. The name of this article is AI Agent Ideas and Research Knowledge Management. Some Gen AI use cases to increase usage of customer insights and product development. Just released on Medium. You can find it under my author name, Jake Burghardt, under my publication, Integrating Research. And the intro image tries to bring home a lot of the ideas around these agents. It includes the title and kind of a preview of these agent names that are covered in more detail throughout the article. Research Alignment Agent, Research Ingester Agent, Research Connector Agent, Repository Reporting Agent, Repository Gardening Agent. So speaking to the fact, because this is knowledge management, that we are connecting into enduring structures for collected research in research repositories. So to read through a bit here and offer some commentary, as generative AI offerings evolve, there's been some growing alignment around a set of use cases where current AI tech can best support customer research processes. Approaches that it can improve the speed of studies. You hear a lot about efficiency in these experts' opinions about how they use AI and the demonstrations that are going on and the classes that are being taught to researchers about how to improve the execution of their studies, and sometimes quality. So bringing up standards, driving people to think in terms of more consistent work, both internally consistent and with other researchers, raising the bar for people who do research. Sometimes quality becomes a positive factor in these. We hear a lot of conversation in generative AI about concerns about drops in quality, but there are some areas where it can increase it as well. Everything from support for developing study plans, so standard documents, to offloading tasks in recruiting workflow, to targeted operations during data analysis. Maybe not wholesale across, here's all of the data and what do you think AI, but constructive use cases that perform smaller operations along the way. Some use cases tend to be more controversial than others. There's certainly some that I find very controversial, and many that I'm beginning to really get excited about. Regardless, overall, adoption is on the rise. In my own work, I do not focus on optimizing study processes. Of course, there's some element of that, but the primary focus with my new book, Stop Wasting Research, is what comes next: research knowledge management and how to keep insights alive in product planning conversations. The role of Gen AI in research processes doesn't have to end when a given research study is complete. Research consolidation and reactivation can also be rich areas for Gen AI-enabled augmentation and automation. We can find new ways to reduce the effort of KM tasks that we're already doing to the extent that teams are. Everybody does knowledge management in some way or another. They just invest in it to different degrees. It may be very informal or something that they're actively working on and working to formalize, while also enabling entirely new types of knowledge structures and flows within organizations. And that's what I spent a lot of time talking about in Stop Wasting Research. But this article outlines ideas for Gen AI use cases to enable more research-based planning. So when they talk about what's the goal of your knowledge management, that is always the root of what I'm working on, getting more research into planning cycles. And this article fits into that mold. It's sort of an appendix to Stop Wasting Research. It paints a picture of what might be possible when Gen AI tools have hooks into multiple types of internal data locations. So using model context protocol and other methods. And those locations might include various research repositories, such as a report library, pulling in from different disciplines, reports into a consolidated space, or an insight summary hub, where insight summaries are sort of a one-stop shop report about a single insight. And if you take that sort of research knowledge and you also have partners planning spaces in a similar environment, like their goals, roadmaps, backlogs, design specifications, whatever the artifacts are in your organization's processes, how can we kind of take advantage of a situation where AI has access to these different sources? The first time I really had an aha moment about this was watching a demonstration of ChatGPT for Business, where they were hooking in a variety of different internal sources. And I think that there's a big space of possibility for getting more value out of research as environments move in this sort of direction. I haven't built these agents yet. One reader said it was sort of a brainstorm. I think that's fair to say. But let's take some time to dream up some ideas as a step along the way to experimenting with what's possible. And since I published the article, a number of folks are telling me that they're trying out different pieces of this. They're already experimenting in these spaces. There's a lot of sort of early days experimentation around these ideas. So an overview of the use case areas in this article. The first one is discovering insights that match a document. The core idea there is that the basic interaction for discovering research through GenAI is often a chatbot. And how can we let people's artifacts that they're creating steer a more nuanced discovery of research by how can they upload those things and learn more? Ingesting research into shared repositories. So as we consolidate research in order to get more value out of it, how can we ease that process and make that consolidation much better? How can we prepare it for use in planning? Connecting research and planning. So if you have a body of research artifacts and you have different planning artifacts, how can we increase the connection between the two of those if we think of this as an overall information system? Creating and distributing different types of reporting. One of the values of consolidating research is to find new ways to communicate it. We can't expect that a lot of big insights are going to land within a study time frame, that they may need more touch points. And how can we enable new kinds of communications with agentic AI in order to do that? And then sort of from a gardening mindset of maintaining repository contents. If you've ever owned a repository or worked with research repositories, you'll know that there's work that needs to be done in order to keep ongoing quality and maintain its usefulness over time. So those are the topics that are covered in terms of use case areas. Let's dive into the first one. Discovering insights that match a document. With generative AI and knowledge workflows, context is crucial. Even still, starting with an empty chat box is often the default interaction for research discovery using AI agents. That's a lot to ask of insight seekers. Given the challenge of specifying their intents, learners are surely missing out on valuable research that can fit their needs. Now, you might come up with a variety of different ways to go after this problem. In this article, I'm imagining a research alignment agent that asks for any documents that you're working on and then suggests targeted research to consider based on those contents. Those suggestions could be links to insight summaries that researchers have already authored, links to research reports from past studies, or metadata filters to say, here's a category of content that you might want to dig into for this particular element of the document that you uploaded. So for each parsed block of content, these kinds of agents can kind of take an overall upload and think about different units within it, depending on the type of document that's uploaded. It could find research that matches in different categories. And when you think about those categories, they could be specific insights that support the idea. Adjacent problems to solve is one of the things that's really valuable about research repositories that often doesn't get discussed about. If you're coming in for X, I can show you Y and Z, and you might not have thought of those. Higher priority problems in the same customer experience area, you're really honed in on this bit, but over there is where the real value might be. Conflicting evidence potentially, or even general customer context to consider. So taking a step back and saying, here's some higher level things that you might want to learn about. These interactions ideally wouldn't end with discovery. Insight seekers could ask the agent to add selected research content back into their own uploaded documents. The agent could cite the selected research knowledge in a standard format that's crystal clear and something that research contributors would be thrilled to see. So I have ideas about this in the Stop Wasting Research book. Citations being an important piece of making research visible, not in an academic sense, just in linking back, building connections between planning and research assets. Additionally, each discovery interaction could also ping our researchers only channel so that researchers can decide whether they want to reach out and amend the agent's outputs, discussing relevant insights, priorities, and other ideas. So to drill down a level from there, if we're in this overall category of a research alignment agent, what are some user stories for discovering insights that match a document? So I've got a few examples here, and they're different kinds of artifacts and thinking about how they could be annotated with research. A study plan enhancer. As a researcher in any discipline, I want to learn about existing research that can inform my draft study plan so that I can, one, give my stakeholders insightful inputs as fast as possible, and two, shape the direction of my investigation with what's already been learned. So we talk about speed to insights. This is about continuous rediscovery, not just continuous discovery of new insights. And throughout this article, I won't get into them too much in this video, but under each of these user stories, there's related sections from the Stop Wasting Research book, even labeling the page number. Sometimes there's just one, as with this user story. Other times there's several. Another user story, when we think about discovering insights that match a document, could be a study report enhancer. So not the plan, but the actual output. So as a researcher in any discipline, I want to improve my draft research report with existing research so that I'm, one, using other existing evidence to make the strongest case for what I learned during my study. I'm pulling in supporting evidence. And two, keeping crucial adjacent insights in the picture. So helping me to think a little bit bigger, turning each study report into a download of what's been learned in the space, not just the latest sample. And from there, we kind of switch gears from researchers to thinking about, okay, what if planners are uploading their assets to this agent? A planning list annotator. So as a product leader, I want to see how existing research aligns with a list of my team's potential plans. That could be a backlog, a goal set, items in a roadmap, etc., whatever format. We're not drilling into one thing here. We're looking at a set. So as I'm making more informed prioritization and trade-off decisions based on what our organization has already learned. And from there, you could deep dive on a particular plan. So if you annotated the overall list, and maybe that's some higher level annotation with research, when you have a particular plan that you're really focusing on, what would it mean to upload that? Maybe you can get a lot more detail there. So as a product leader, I want to see a thorough pull of existing research to shape one of my team's particular work items, whether it's a particular goal, a plan, experiment, feature, etc., so that I'm avoiding known issues and maximizing the value that's delivered. These are things that research can do. It's what we do in the study cycle. We can also look to do it with knowledge management and activating knowledge. And this agent is an idea for going down that path. In particular, we could talk about designs. So a design annotator. As a designer, I want to use known research insights to improve my design concepts and arguments so that I'm creating in a way that avoids known issues and delivers for customer and business needs. Designers being enthusiastic users of research often. We can think about their deliverables and kind of the needs of an agent in that space a little bit differently. You can keep going from here. These are just some ideas. But moving on to the second use case area, ingesting research into shared repositories. So we talked about sort of a discovery mechanism, but how does it get there in the first place? To get more value out of research learning, it's beneficial to consolidate various researchers' outputs in structured, standardized ways. That's so much easier said than done. A lot of the conversation about research repositories has been about the challenge of getting researchers to successfully follow expected standards and practices. From the contributor side, processes can feel convoluted and generally not worth the trouble, especially when the payoff isn't obvious. This creates a chicken or egg problem. You can't reactivate research if it hasn't been stockpiled in some way, and you can't get researchers interested in new kinds of impacts that leverage repositories until you've been able to demonstrate those impacts in some way. So, how can agentic tech play a role here? Just thinking through it. Imagine a research ingester agent that offloads some of the specifics of correctly contributing to research repositories. So you're building high quality, standardized knowledge, but you're doing it in an easier way. So an agent finds that the right prior repository location, applies expected governance rules, for example, removing personally identifiable information, helps to add the right metadata, and suggests how the uploaded learning might contribute to existing insight summaries or create new ones. So it's kind of an overview of different ideas there. I drill into each one of those below, but just to talk about the metadata one in particular. The metadata support alone of some sort of ingestion agent could be a huge win. So many of the complaints about using research repositories correctly are about applying metadata. And in Stop Wasting Research, I talk about a variety of categories of metadata, from describing each asset that gets added to a repository in a standardized way so that different stripes of researchers can kind of talk about the research in a common way. And so that there's sort of a nutrition facts when you click into a particular research asset when you're discovering, and you can kind of see where it came from, what its provenance is. It can help build research literacy that way. I talk about different insight types, fundamentals and problems to solve, breaking out different categories. That can be a useful category of metadata. And then findability is obviously a big element here, not at the study level, sort of deep in analysis, but once we have the assets that come out of studies and we're talking about the learning and we're trying to get more value out of that learning, you can think about sort of customer-centered, like a journey map or, a set of jobs to be done. Or you could think about internally focused. The most important metadata for getting things done and to stop wasting research is to have owning teams and, something that maps to the internal organization. I talk about prioritization as well. We could talk about a variety of other things like citations and progress. But, across all of this, you could come up with all sorts of great metadata ideas, but how do we ensure that they're consistently applied? How can an AI and agents help with that? So I'm interested in exploring LLM as a judge, flows for each metadata element, and then kind of adding them up into these blocks of content, with the output reviewed by the contributor who's uploaded the research. So if this is an ingestion agent, it's not fully automated and spits the thing out on the other side. You're kind of reviewing it along the way to make sure that it's correct and correcting it where it's not. So some user stories in this ingestion space, getting content into shared repositories, whole reports into a report library. As a researcher, I want to quickly and easily add my research report to my organization's community report library so that my work can be more visible and be discovered and applied by researchers and insight users. An insight summary amender. So there's a lot of cases where you find additional evidence for an insight that's already been discovered. So how can we keep pulling that work together to make a more compelling case for an insight summary? Again, an insight summary being sort of a report about one insight. It's a one-stop shop that you can link to about a particular insight that we can cite in plans as like the reason for justification for what we're doing. And as a researcher, I want evidence from my uploaded report to be added to any matching insight summaries that already exist so that I can help build the case for key customer problems to solve and share the impact when the insight is eventually prioritized by an owning team. So if different researchers are adding to the same insight summary, when it eventually becomes a win, all those research contributors get to share in that win. That's the benefit in contributing into communities like this. In Stop Wasting Research, because I cover a big definition of research, and in this article, I'm taking a similar mindset. I'm not talking about research analysis tools where we're getting to study results by using AI. Instead, I'm saying we're taking the finished outputs of whatever tooling you used, because there's never one tool that rules them all, and finding ways to ingest that into repositories in common ways. So we have reports, we have insight summaries. If an insight summary doesn't already exist, maybe there's a creator agent. As a researcher, I want to create a new summary for a top priority insight so that I can build evidence for that insight across studies and silos and tie into operations that will keep the insight present in planning conversations. A variety of areas there from the book talking about insight summaries. And then, those are common kinds of ingestion, two big objects, reports and insight summaries that I focus on for getting more value out of research. Reports being an easy or ask to just say, can we put our reports into a consolidated space? Insight summaries being sort of an atomized way of thinking about research, about particular problems to solve and particular customer fundamentals that is more directly applicable to tying into planning. But, beyond those objects, when we're thinking about what the content that's in our repositories, another thing that's exciting when you think about connecting different kinds of storage through, a common AI framework is an uningested research crawler. As a research repository manager, I want to discover customer research in our organization that has not been added to our research repositories so that I can reach out and connect with the investigator about potentially onboarding to our community and operations. So discovering what's going on in the organization, whether it's people who do research or, researchers that haven't onboarded to an initiative yet. In some organizations, it can be hard to track folks down, especially if you really think about a variety of different kinds of research, not just a particular home discipline like market research or UX research, but sales analysis and customer support and different kinds of program managers maybe doing intensive analyses that a researcher would look at and say, hey, that's research. Tracking those things down, how can agentic tech help with that? So that's the second use case area. There's three more. So once you have a body of content in a repository, how can you connect it forward into planning? So certainly the annotation agent that we talked about where, it's suggesting research for whatever document you upload, that's one great way to connect it in. But, when we're looking across the information sources in an organization, how can we increase the connections? So researchers often struggle to track which of their insights have informed which product plans. Even when research is integral to a given plan, it may be invisible. Too often, research learning doesn't get included or referenced in a way that would make it traceable. It's nowhere to be seen. So let's imagine a research connector agent that promotes linkages between research assets and the plans they're informing, inspiring, or justifying. An agent that can search planning information spaces to identify where research is being used and then pull related information back into research systems. Research linkages can become a form of currency that demonstrates the value of insights in product planning. And even if only some proportion of planning artifacts end up with references to specific research, any increase in this ratio could be a step change for understanding impact. A lot about this idea in Stop Wasting Research. We're not going for perfect. We're trying to get to better, more research-informed planning. So some user stories, ideas in this connection space, citation finder. So as a research repository manager, I want to identify where research is being cited in planning information so that I can connect those linkages back into our repositories to have a two-way link to track usage and impact. And with that, if you happen to uncover high priority plans that don't have research cited, maybe it's an opportunity to call our first agent to find out, for that plan, what's applicable research. So these agents can connect and call to each other potentially as we're sort of brainstorming ideas here. And once you have that connection, another use case is a planning status ingester. So the story here is, as a research repository manager, I want to extract any updated status information for planning assets that are connected to our research assets so that our community can stay abreast of progress and new impacts. It's one thing to say, yeah, this research informed this plan and, I can point to a ticket. It's another thing to say, when I look at the research, it has that planning information pulled in. And how can agentic tech enable what is otherwise, a painstaking knowledge management task, having done some of that myself. An impact story identifier is another kind of connection. As a research repository manager or research manager, I want to discover impact stories that I might add to our community's shared impact tracker so that I can, one, elevate the profile of contributors, and two, build a list that's filterable by insight generating discipline, research team, and individual researchers. So kind of a common space where a research community is tracking impact that you can kind of filter to different levels, and we can kind of tell the story of this very individualistic work and starting to think about it in a more collective way and share impacts with each other. So this kind of identifies little stubs that you can then turn into insight stories in that tracker. And, another idea in this space, if you're kind of connecting research and planning, you can think about coverage. A common question is, do we have any research about this or that? Well, if you're scanning planning documents just to brainstorm, you can kind of think ahead. As a research repository manager, I want to understand underrepresented topic areas in our research repositories, given our partners' emerging plans and content gaps in our own metadata frameworks, so that I can provide input to research teams' roadmaps and increase useful coverage. So, getting out ahead and using this as an opportunity to say not just what research do we have and what's the distribution of that, but what's coming down the pipe potentially. Two more use case areas. The second to last one is creating and distributing different kinds of reporting. Researchers share their learning in different ways, tailoring their communications to build stakeholder empathy and drive action. Even still, sharing outputs around the time frame of a study may not be enough. In some cases, it is. Those are the wins that researchers are already celebrating today. But insight generators may not be giving decision makers enough of the right touch points over time to influence their product bets. So folks want to talk about wanting to move forward and do more strategic research. Often it's really the underlying question is influencing strategic decisions more. Active knowledge management can help do that and keep insights alive over time. Researchers are already doing amazing things that are shifting products and creating great experiences for customers and their current level of impact. This is about sort of how do we continue to build out from there and deliver more of that research-based planning value. So when researchers take the time to add their work to shared repositories, that collective output needs to be made more visible. This isn't just I go to this place and find things. We have to push out from it. It needs mind share and presence. As research learning accrues, different types of reporting are a necessity to make the most of accumulated insights. So imagine a repository reporting agent that can streamline the process of broadcasting or even narrowcasting research knowledge in predictable and digestible ways. So if you give this agent an example report or reports to emulate and then feed it filtered sets of repository contents, it can generate draft options for the next report in the series. So, keeping the user in the loop, the report creator in the loop so that they can kind of refine and editorialize along the way. This isn't just one and done sort of a full automation in most cases. I don't think that makes sense, but, certainly help along the way to creating these reports can make them more of a reality, and new kinds of reporting can lead to new kinds of impacts. Some user story ideas for creating and distributing different types of reporting. Let's talk about those new types of reports and the kind of impacts they might enable. So a new learning reporter, so this is about visibility. As a research repository manager, I want to broadcast a compelling summary of the latest learning in our research repositories, whether that's our research library, our Insight Summary Hub, and some news stories of great research impacts. The people that we would wish we can clone and the types of things that they're doing with research and the behaviors we want to see more of. Why do all that? So that I can raise the profile of our contributing researcher community and drive mindshare for important problems to solve. So a bunch of ideas there from Stop Wasting Research book, and ranging from those different types of reports to championing lead users of research-informed planning. It's such an important part of knowledge management is celebrating the behaviors that you want to see more of. What about if that's an all-new research reporter and something that helps generate that? Imagine kind of distributing that further and further in your organization. But then you have the narrowcasting. We want a team to get things done with insight. So this is an owning team reporter. As a research repository manager, I want to narrowcast insights that are relevant to a particular owning team so that I can keep those decision makers connected to new learning in their space while suggesting customer problems that need their effort. So insights for a particular team. Another kind of reporting that is useful to have some sort of augmentation to maybe make it a little bit different each time, highlight different things different times, but keep those insights alive. A different perspective would be to say across all teams, the top insights. As a research repository manager, I want to share owning teams' progress against the highest priority insight summaries that our insight generating community has put forward so that leadership can make more informed decisions about resource allocations. These are the top problems. These are what teams are doing about them. You look at these holes. What could that mean for this next planning cycle? How can we design reports to lead to the kind of outcomes, the kind of planning outcomes that we're hoping to see? We work backwards from those. This is one idea. A custom repository alerter is an idea of, as a researcher insight seeker, I want to be able to define certain topics in our research repositories and receive regular updates on new learning in those areas so I can stay connected to the customer insights that matter to me. So something that keeps you abreast of what you care most about. And the last use case area, just to wrap here before getting on to a little bit of a conclusion, there's clearly an opportunity for maintaining repository contents when we talk about agentic tech. So as content and research repositories expands, new types of maintenance work appears. Is everything still compliant with our governance rule set? Does each research asset have the correct metadata, especially as our definitions evolve? Is each of our top insights still relevant for product planning? Did something already get solved? Is something no longer applicable because we axed that area of the business? Should some research be archived, for later? Can we get it out of the space where people are discovering so that they can focus on the problems that really matter, that are grounded in research? In reality, given other more pressing priorities, these types of review may not get done on the regular. There's some painful experience behind that sentence. So when I think about help that AI and agentic tech can do, imagine a repository gardening agent that helps ensure that content is up to standards, determines if any assets need to be archived, and answers questions about established knowledge management procedures. So covering some of the basics of gardening a repository and kind of maintaining it. So some user stories in that area. You can have a governance checker. We talked about it on the ingestion side, but scanning content and maybe governance definition changes, or maybe things get added to the repository in a different way. But as a research repository manager, I want to make sure that research contributors have adequately followed governance standards and the work they've added so that our repositories are compliant with legal, privacy, information security, ethics, and other policies in our organization. Metadata validator. As a research repository manager, I want to make sure that researchers have added accurate metadata to their assets so that our repositories remain easy to navigate and informative. Again, a form of gardening. Again, metadata being an area of complaint, it's easy for it to get run away and to become less useful over time. So how can agentic tech help keep current and help us focus in on the set of metadata that's most valuable? The book has some ideas to kind of narrow in on a few different types. Expiration checker, whenever we talk about the durability of research, this always comes up. And this isn't the idea of a hard, fast expiration date. But as a repository manager, I want to check to make sure that insight summaries are still relevant. It's an expiration check, not an expiration date, where we throw it out immediately. This is an agent to help with that process so that our research repository remains up to date and relevant. And the last one of our user stories before getting to the summary is a knowledge management practice advisor. As a research contributor, I want to conversationally learn standards and expected practices from our research knowledge management playbook and wikis so that I don't have to read every manual to get answers to real-time questions. Pretty common use of agentic tech to say, support me in conducting research and surfacing standards through an agent. This is for the knowledge management side, could be blended into one where it makes sense. But getting people to the standards that matter most without them having to put in all the effort of scanning everything in a more conversational way. So in summary, if we take a step back, we talked about how GenAI can add value in sort of research execution and the study process, but agentic tools can also augment what happens after studies are complete. And this brainstorm and this article is intended to kind of push that space very much in line with the ideas in the Stop Wasting Research book. They can reduce effort needed to consolidate research and activate it over the long haul of product development. And by guiding towards standards or even enforcing them, they can also increase quality. And as organizations think more about their insights workflows, builders can define a range of different agentic interactions to enable specific outcomes. So, with some vision and some clear eyed task analysis, the old fashioned HCI task analysis, breaking down, looking inward at research work and what we want to do with research assets, agentic interactions present exciting opportunities to activate more research wealth. So I close by saying, let's not sleep on these. As I mentioned at the top, since publishing the article, people have been telling me that they're already kind of experimenting in these areas. So really exciting space to be digging into. And I do want to call out some of the sources that really inspired me in this work. Brad Arego's piece for a great question, highly recommended. Similarly, Rodrigo Dalsen's Transformative Power of Automation, one of the Cha-Cha Club articles, very useful for thinking about this space. And a couple of posts from LinkedIn, one from Thijs van den Burg. Apologies for if I'm mispronouncing the name. LinkedIn post that breaks down a few kinds of agents that really got me inspired to think about this article. And then Caitlin Sullivan's produced so much great stuff about AI and UX research. And this is a LinkedIn post talking about what are you using Claude code for that I found particularly inspiring. Again, the book is Stop Wasting Research, Maximize the Product Impact of Your Organization's Customer Insights. It has some ideas about AI in there, but I wanted to expand it. You could think of this article as sort of an appendix that brings a lot of the ideas in that book and says, thinking with this sort of automation and augmentation lens. If you made it this far in this video, thanks so much. Again, my name is Jake Burghardt. You can find my newsletter at integratingresearch.com, and please do connect. Thanks so much.